pause it for a minute. Go ahead.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Susan Couch, and I am a HASC member and chair of the Science, Medical, and Technology Committee. I'm really proud to once again introduce my husband, David Couch, to talk about what companies know about you. He's been a speaker in quite a few of the last terms, but I'll run through his background a little bit again for you. Dave is retired from the position of Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Spartan-Nash Corporation, a position he held for 22 years. In that role, he had the responsibility for business systems, technical infrastructure, and communications technology. He has over 50 years of experience in information technology in retail, wholesale, and manufacturing organizations. He holds a bachelor's in business administration and a master's in computer science, both from the University of Arizona. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I appreciate everybody's attendance and so forth. I put together this presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. Hold on a second. And can everybody see the slides?
Good, Dave.
Okay. So I'm going to clean up my screen a little bit here. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is what companies know about you. This is a huge topic. And so I've sort of picked and have chosen a number of areas that I think matter the most. Either you're familiar with them or you're not familiar with them and might be quite surprised. So anyhow, what I'm going to, hold on a second, got to get, there we go. So what I'm going to do is first talk about information collection that you're probably aware of that exists today. And then I'm going to talk about tracking on the internet. And I'm going to pick some different topics. Again, I could spend an hour just on that topic alone. But then I'm going to talk about data brokers. And I think that's actually in some ways the most interesting thing. And because they're companies you've never heard of, and the information, you would be probably aghast at the amount of information they have about us. Talk a little bit about internet advertising on the internet, and talk a little bit about what you can do about it, which is an interesting thing, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So I thought to have a little fun, I would start out with this ad that you may have seen if you watched the Super Bowl. If not, you'll find it enjoyable.
Hey, babe, check this out. Alexa, it's game day.
Streaming football on Prime Video, closing blinds, chilling rosé.
Rosé?
Well, it's an afternoon game.
It's like she can read your mind. I love that we get to sleep in.
Ordering fresh mint mouthwash. Extra strength.
I'm thinking I should get a spray tan, you know, because it's on Wednesday.
Activating blender.
Funeral's on Monday.
But what about the gold, Papa? Can't you see the treasure all along? It was here.
Love the eye patch. When does the show open?
March 8th.
Setting reminder to fake your own death on March 8th.
Thought,
What the?
when you have to do those love scenes with hot guys, is that fun or is that like the worst?
It's the worst.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
Charlotte, this bread is delicious. Did you make it?
Yes, it's from my Gammy's recipe.
Announcement. Gammy is short for she bought it at Whole Foods. Announcement. Colin left the oysters in the car for 5 hours.
It's probably better Alexa can't read your mind.
Bad idea.
That's the game.
So anyhow, I kind of thought that was.
Hey, babe, check this out.
Hold on here. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I thought that was kind of cute and apropos for this topic. So kind of as a high level view, people are collecting data about us all over the place. Different entities, they've been doing it for a long time, but with the advent of the internet and cell phones and wearables and so forth. It's just gone, it's become that much of a greater of an issue. So if you look at this diagram, the bubbles around kind of show you, the telcos and media companies, they have been tracking what we've been doing for years. Media and publishing, they want the information and or they collect the information. Retail consumer goods and services down there at the bottom there, you'll see, we'll talk about some of the things that go on there that cause an amazing amount of data to be collected about what we do. Up there at the top, the telco providers, they see everything you do on your cell phone, they see, and so forth. And we'll talk about that. Large platforms, all the, the Googles, the Facebooks, Amazons, they're all collecting data on us. Financial services companies, credit card companies, they see everything we spend, where we spend our money, and through the sales of anonymized version of this information, others can make inferences about what lives we live and so forth, all of which you're going to see later in the presentation. And then the public sector, governmental entities and so forth, utilities, whatnot, they all have their piece of data that they collect. And then there's the whole government surveillance, which you really don't know a whole lot about, how much actually goes on there or not. And certainly in our society, it's not like it is in others. So anyhow, all of these are elements. And then what all they're trying to do is in the center there, they're trying to manage customers. They're trying to get marketing data. They're trying to analyze risk of doing business with us. Supporting the IT organizations of these businesses and advertising technology. And a lot of what you're going to see today centers around marketing and advertising. It's not like all of this is nefarious. It's a lot of it's somewhat benign, and it sort of depends on your attitude as how you feel about it. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So first, we're going to talk about what I call known information collection. We're going to talk about the credit reporting industry. We're going to talk about loyalty programs. We're going to talk a little bit about license plate tracking and credit card activity. These are all things that we do every day, and most people are aware of what's going on here. So in the credit reporting industry, there's three major entities out there: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. There's some other smaller players, but these are the big three by far. And what they do is they collect, I consider what they do much more benign than some of these other activities, in that they basically collect information about how we pay. Are we good credit risks in terms of if we pay our loans, like if we have a car loan or if we have a mortgage, do we pay on time and with good history? Likewise, credit cards, do we pay our bills in a timely basis? Do we make minimum payments and so forth? And then they collect from other areas as well, and we'll see some of that later. They in turn sell that evaluation of us based on collecting all that data and combining it, and then reselling it to other businesses. So they're trying to decide, is Dave Couch a good credit risk? He wants a mortgage, he wants to borrow X amount of dollars, or he wants to buy a car, an automobile, and wants to get a loan. What kind of credit risk is he? And am I willing to, does he have a credit risk profile that I'm willing to deal with? So again, these guys all been around for a long time. A little bit of more information about them. So if you look at their sources, General Credit Cards represents about 40% of the data they get. And it's not transactions, not necessarily what you're spending on those cards, but what's your payment history, what's your balance been, and how reliable of a payer are you of those bills? Do you pay it off all the time? Do you make minimum payments? All those sorts of things. Retail credit cards, so if you have a Lowe's credit card, or you have a Nordstrom credit card, or TJ Maxx, or any of the various retailers, 18% of the data they get is based on pulling in data from retail credit cards. Auto lenders, about 4% of the data they get comes from auto loans, about 7% from mortgage lenders. And then there's a variety of other sources. In some cases, like I think it's Experian has an Experian Boost service, which is a little bit questionable. They want you, if you sign up for that service, basically they're going to collect information about your payment of utility bills and some other things that they normally don't collect. It doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of your scoring, but it's a way for them to extract more money from you. So then from that, they create what's known as a FICO score. FICO was originally developed by a company, Fair Isaac Corporation, a number of years ago. I want to say it was in the 70s. I don't remember quite for sure, but you can see that there's and I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you have less than a 580 score, you're considered, you're a risky borrower, you're well below the average, and so forth. If you're in that 670 to 730 range, you're a little bit above average, but that's a good score. You want to be in that range. And all the way up to 800. And if 800, you're exceptional, you're well above average, and an incredibly reliable credit risk, if you will. So if you look at how they factor all this in, so about 35% of how they factor into that FICO score is basically your payment history. Then there's 30% that is how much you owe. In other words, how much do you utilize credit? And so that's a 30% factor. 15% is the length of time that you have had credit. In other words, have you had this credit card, or have you had this loan? How many years have you had known credit information? 10% is whether if you're a new borrower, if you will, and then 10% is the mix of credit from the different types. And so those are kind of a general view of what the score factors are. And then if you look at how it's calculated by agency, so what this basically tells you that Experian and Equifax are basically the same in terms of how they weight the various pieces of information. TransUnion, they have a little bit higher rating, a higher factor of your payment history, about 5% more, yet utilization is about 10% less that they factor into their scoring. Credit age is higher in the case of TransUnion than the other two. Different credit types about the same. And there's always this issue about numbers of inquiries. And that's how often are you doing something that causes them to inquire to the credit agencies about your credit rating. You can see TransUnion weights that about half of what the other two. But in any case, that's a pretty small factor in how things are scored. So that's a little bit about the credit rating agencies and so forth. We've all dealt with them. But I would also tell you that if you aren't getting a loan, if you don't have any debt, your score in some ways doesn't really matter. If you, and you know, how many of us live in a totally cash world, but it really only matters as it relates to getting to borrowing. So let's talk next about loyalty programs. And this varies widely. And these programs, people know a lot. And so, and I have a little bit of experience in this, in that I worked for a company that in their 3 businesses, one of them was retail. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go through it. But you have, excuse me, you have retailers, e-commerce retailers like Amazon, and many retailers now have an electronic portion, an online presence. There's brick and mortar stores, restaurants, many restaurants, it's especially higher end restaurants. Loyalty programs are important. The travel industry is huge. Hotels, they want you to be part of their loyalty program, and so they give you discounts and so forth. And airlines is even bigger. And what they try and do, we'll talk about in a minute, is they're trying to build an affinity, build a relationship between you and the customer. And then small businesses may have it. Credit card companies may not may have, credit cards, companies have loyalty programs and so forth. And sometimes it's aligned with an airline or a hotel, and sometimes it's just the card business itself. So why do you do loyalty programs? Well, so the first thing is customer retention. Is that you want to make sure that your customer is happy. You want to understand your customer so that you're satisfying their needs. And you want to foster brand advocacy. And so building that relationship, we get aligned with certain companies based on how they service us. And the loyalty programs are a way for them to understand the customer. When I was in the grocery business, we would look at different customers and say, and evaluate how much they would spend in a basket. So if they came in and spent $20, that was one type of customer, maybe not as profitable of customer, as opposed to somebody who comes in and fills their basket and spends $100 or $150 or whatever. And so it allows you to identify unprofitable customers, because that small basket, maybe the cost to serve is such that until you get them to the larger basket, you don't make as much money. Not that they're totally unprofitable, but or if they only buy sales and they don't buy much, in the grocery business, because of the low margins, that might not be a profitable customer. And then you do it to build relationships. I can remember when we would, in every store, we would take our top 10 or top 20 customers at Christmas time and give them a poinsettia, or we'd give them some sort of a special discount and so forth to encourage them and build that relationship. Win back customers. So you're tracking customers' buying habits, and you see that, generally they come in, and again, I'll use the grocery example just because of my experience there. And so, hey, we see this person comes in and spends $100 a week or whatever the number is. And then a competitor comes into the area, and all of a sudden they go down to 10 or 20 bucks a week. So what happened? Well, they must have liked that new competitor, and so you lost them. And so as you go through the data and analyze and determine who's spending money, and we call them lost and lapsed customers, then you start sending them coupons, sending them discounts and so forth to pull them back, and analyze the data, analyze what they're buying, what they're no longer buying, and so forth. And so you can make decisions and incent the customer to come back. Likewise, customer development. Maybe you have a person that doesn't spend a lot, and so you want to get them up to a higher level of spending. And so again, you might send them emails, you might send them coupons in the mail, you might interact with emails, lots of different vehicles to try and develop that customer and grow them. A perfect example in the grocery business, a wine customer is typically a much more profitable customer, because the profile of a wine customer is they tend to buy higher end products in general. And so you work to develop that wine business and be noted for wine, because it increases profitability and increases customer loyalty to your brand. Competitive advantage, you can talk directly to your customers if they're in your loyalty programs. And so you have a connection there that allows you to communicate directly with them and be able to counteract other moves by the competition. And that same ability allows you to reduce advertising costs. So, and again, my experience in the grocery industry, there's the weekly flyer, and there's this great debate in the industry. It's been going on for 20 years, is when does digital take over from printing a weekly flyer? Because they spend a fortune, millions of dollars printing that flyer every week. And different people, Target has experimented with it. Different people, some have reduced it, eliminated it, and so forth. And through a loyalty program, I can talk directly to my customers in a much more efficient way, and then acquire new customers and so forth. So all this allows you to increase your return on investment, increase sales, typically get the customer to buy more, and get a lot more insight into what your customer likes, wants, and you may alter your product offering based on that information. So loyalty programs are a really big deal, and And with the advent of digital, which we'll talk about later, you throw that into the mix and there's some pretty interesting things you can do. So little piece of license plate data. People typically don't think about this. Now, if you go around Chicago and you've got I can't remember what it is, Easy Pass or whatever the nomenclature is, and there's different systems around the country. You have an RFID tag, a little module that you put up in your dashboard that identifies your car. But the other thing they do is they ask you for the license plate of your car. And so when you go under those toll plazas, there is both a reader to read the RFID tag on your car and to read your license plate. And so they keep track and correlate the two. Well, so law enforcement also has cameras, typically on the dashboard of a police car, that allows them to read the license plate, and they can, with their computer systems, can know something about that car and who it's registered to before they ever interact with you in the car. And there's private companies that do this, collect data based on license plate knowledge that is around the country. And so they're used widely in law enforcement. You can see lots of different things: stolen vehicles, identifying felons, Amber Alerts, etc. But then there's also private sector use. So it's biggest in the vehicle repossession business, looking for license plates of vehicles that they've fallen lapse on their loan and they're in the repossession process. Even people who have companies that have large vehicle fleets, by reading license plates and getting that information, which is provided by a number of companies. I list one there called Digital Recognition Network. They have through various means collect license plates and identify. And so if you have a fleet and you want to make sure, if you have a fleet that covers many states, you can bounce the data that you have, the information you have about your fleet, against information provided by this company and say, are my vehicles where they should be? In other words, if I have vehicles that are in the upper Midwest and all of a sudden one shows up in Texas, what's that? And I didn't expect it to be down there. Why is that? And then another thing, a simple thing at retail, kind of a low tech analysis, is looking at cars. You can do what's called a license plate study and analyze what license plates appear in your parking lot in a given week, and collect all that data and be able to identify where those cars came from. Where are the shoppers? If you don't have a loyalty program or don't necessarily understand information about who all your customers are, you can look and see, well, gee, most of them come from Ottawa County, or some of them come from downtown Holland, or some come from Park Township, all based on the registration information on those license plates. So there's a variety of things they can do. Just one of the things I thought was interesting is in all of this that we're going to talk about, the laws in this country vary widely, and an awful lot of this stuff is done because we don't have sort of federal standards. Every state's different. So if you look at the license plate data the laws, only 16 states have regulations on data retention for license plates. In New Hampshire, they can only keep it in the database for 3 minutes. In Colorado, it's 3 years. But there aren't really laws on private companies' use of license plate data. And so that's how these companies exist. So I thought you might find that one interesting. The only thing here is on credit cards. So we all have, many people have credit cards, and the credit card data, credit card companies sell data to individuals. They don't necessarily, they're not selling your credit card number, but they'll sell the fact that, you went to Myers on Tuesday at 5 p.m. and spent $150. And you'll see later on that transaction data is sold to others, and that is then combined with other information to learn and derive more information about us as how we lived and how we live. So it's anonymized data. So it's not, it doesn't have our social security number and so forth. They typically don't have your name and so forth. They'll just say, hey, this Visa card, and they'll come up with a unique way to identify all the cards that come from you, not your social security number, not your credit card number, but just a selected number. And they'll sell that information. You'll see later how that gets used. So let's switch now from some sort of the things that have been around for many, many years, and let's talk about internet. So as we talk about the internet, we're going to talk about cookies, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, talk a little bit about search engines, talk about cell phones, and just a couple comments about digital assistants, the Alexa and Siri and so forth, and then talk a little bit about wearables. So something to remember here, there's an adage in the technology industry that if the product is free, you are the product. And by that, I mean, if you use Gmail or you use an app on your phone and they don't charge you for that app, there's some other way that company is making money. And typically the way they're making money is by selling the information they know about you to others. And it varies all over the map. This is, at a very high level, it's very true, but it varies dramatically depending on the application, depending on the situation and so forth. But it's if you do the research, you'll find that 99% of the time this is true, or 98%. So let's first talk about cookies. What is a cookie? So when you get on the web and go traverse and look for a website, you go find that website, request from your browser, you type in some URL or whatever, and it goes to a server and the server responds. And when it responds, it also sends a cookie. It's a little piece of information. We'll see in the next slide a little bit more detail about it. And that information is stored on your hard drive by your browser that says that, I just went to Lowe's.com and so regardless of how your interaction, it parks a little piece of data that says you were here. And then so then let's say you leave and you go elsewhere, something else, you get interrupted on the phone or whatever, and hey, I can't get back to it, and you come back. When you go back online and you go to Lowe's, that cookie, that little piece of information that Lowe's put on your machine gets sent back with that request. So then Lowe's know, oh, I've seen you before, and so your computer sends that cookie back, and then what happens after that varies, and we'll talk more about that. So cookies, they're a little bit of technical information. They represent about 4,000 characters. That's how the maximum size. So you can put a lot of information in that cookie. They can support and these are sort of the rules and guidelines that browsers, whether you use Chrome or IE, the different browsers that the different platforms use, they have to follow these rules. So any given website can have up to 50 cookies from that website, and your browser has to be able to support a minimum of 3,000 cookies. The big thing here is first-party cookies and third-party cookies. What's the difference? First-party cookies generally are quite good because what they are there for is for the website to be efficient and to work, and it improves your user experience. So they can store things like, well, what did you search? And what were you looking for? And my favorite example is that you will go out to Amazon and you look at something and go, and I put it in my basket, but I get interrupted and I don't, or I'm just still thinking about it. And so it sits in the basket, but I haven't checked out, I haven't actually bought it. And so then I get up, go away, turn my machine off, whatever, come back. And when I go back out to Amazon, Amazon picks up its cookie and says, "Oh, yeah, you had this in your shopping cart, and so you can go and it's still there. You haven't checked out, but it knows through that cookie that you were there before, and it uses other things like language preference, the various optimization for things." To make for the website to work. And so the important part is here to understand is first-party cookies are good. First-party cookies are important tools that allow the website to work effectively. Third-party cookies are another matter. Third-party cookies, and there's some things going on in the industry that this is going to start to wane, but you've all seen the effect of third-party cookies. And basically what it does is If you go to a website and they have an ad on the screen that they present to you, when that ad gets presented to your computer, that ad gets recorded as a cookie, as a third-party cookie. It was an ad from some a website or an ad selling service. But it's, Lowe's had the screen, and they have some spare space in the screen and want to make a little money. So they sell that space and that screen they sell advertising for that little box over in the corner of the screen. When that ad comes up, it puts a third-party cookie on your machine. And through the process, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but they can keep track of where you go and what your interests are. And my favorite example is a few years ago, I was looking for an air compressor, a particular type of air compressor that's quiet. And so I was out shopping, and I think I was on Amazon or whatever, and I was looking at it. I didn't put it in my shopping cart. I didn't proceed. And after I did that, everywhere I went, there was an ad for that air compressor, that brand of air compressor that happens to be quiet. It's a relatively complex thing. And so I put this one up, and again, I'm not going to explain it in detail, but when that page comes up and there's ads on that page, you can see they come in and they put their cookie down, but they're putting other cookies that are based on the ads that you're seeing. And through all that, as you traverse the web, people can see where you've been and what you've looked at and what you seem to be interested in. And so that's one of the ways that as you traverse the web, that they can keep track of you. We'll talk a little bit later about what to do about it. And it's also changing, but we'll talk some more. Search engines. Search engines collect data on you. So if you use Google or Bing or Yahoo, Google is the dominant. If you go to Google, and I'm going to send out a document later that help you if you want to take on the challenge of trying to undo some of this stuff. You can go to Google, and they will regurgitate back to you every search that you've ever made in Google, what you've looked at, where you've been, how much time you spent, Bing and Yahoo, all those folks do the same thing. But remember, Google, they make their money based on advertising. That is their form of profit. Bing is owned by Microsoft, and so they make their money in a totally different way. If you don't want people collecting data about you, DuckDuckGo is my favorite. That's the one I happen to use. They make their money in a different way. There's some advertising involved, but they don't track all your activities, and they don't collect data and share data about you. And there's iXQuick, but DuckDuckGo is, in my opinion, is the one to use. And then there's the other piece of use a VPN, and we'll talk more about VPN. I've got a slide coming up about it. It's called a virtual private network, and it's a way to encrypt your information as you flow around the web. So New York Times, they have a service called Wirecutter that does a lot of technical analysis. And what they did was they looked at what data is used to track you as you move around on the web. And you can see its purchases, location, where you physically are, search history, other identifiers, financial information, contact information, browsing history, and usage data. And data that's actually linked to you. So in the first column, it's how they track what you do. And then the second column is data that they collect that becomes information to link to your identity in whatever fashion that they can then be attributes about you. And then the data that's not linked to you is your location at that instant and diagnostics that you run. So let's talk about cell phones and tablets. So this has really changed the game. So AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, everything that you do on that cell phone is seen and collected by AT&T, by the carriers. So they know your equipment information. There's some internal identifying numbers and so forth. I won't get into all that of how they, your cell phone is not the key. Your cell phone number is not the key. There's other information behind the scenes, EIN numbers and so forth, that they use to track you. They know all your call information, who you've called, who you've called, how long you've talked, and so forth. They know physically where you are. And where, as you move around, they know where you are. And you can, it doesn't matter if you say, well, don't share my location information. They know, in order for the cell towers to home in on you, they know geographically within, I can't remember what the number is. I'll say within about 50 meters of where you're standing or using your phone. They know what browsing after wherever you spent browsing. They know any activity you've done with various apps. Every text message, if you get involved in some sort of legal issue, they can go to the carrier and ask and request every text that you've ever sent. So anyhow, they know an enormous amount of information about you, whether you're using a cell phone or whether you're using a tablet. And they sell this information. They sell, in some ways it's anonymized, it varies, but they know everything. Now there's something you can do about this one, but we'll talk about that later. And location tracking. So location tracking, there's three things. There's one's called geo-targeting. So I want to talk to people that cell phones are in downtown Holland as an example. Geofencing, well, I got another slide about that, where a particular retailer can talk to you on your phone if you have their loyalty app and you go within, let's say, and they can set it to whatever they want, within 200 meters of the store or 100 meters of the store, they might send you an ad. And then there's another technology, beaconing. This isn't used as much. I know when I was, just before I retired, we were doing some testing with this technology, and that's where a store can know physically where you are in the store, and through a couple different ways, how you're using Wi-Fi, or they put little transmitters in the shelves about every 10 feet. And so they can tell what aisle you're in and what area you're sitting in front of. So if you have, for example, if you're in a grocery store and you have the loyalty app, and you we know that you like to buy Kellogg's Rice Krispies, and you're in the Kellogg, excuse me, we're in the cereal aisle, and we can send a message to you saying, hey, there's a 50-cent discount on Kellogg's Rice Krispies today, and you get it. And so the point is they can talk to you at the point of purchase. Now, this is technology. It's the technology companies are trying to market it. I would say it's not implemented in a great many places, but you will find it in some higher end stores, different places and so forth. So it definitely works, and it's relatively cost effective. So geofencing, basically what happens is you take your location where your retail store is, and you set a perimeter, and as the cell towers are telling your phone, they know the longitude and latitude of where you are. And so as you get within a range of whatever that retailer said is decided, you have their loyalty app installed. Then they can say, and they go back to the case of, well, I've got a wine customer and you come within range of my store, they can send you a notification that pops up on your phone, says, hey, we got a wine sale today, it's 20% off. And so it's a way to interact with your customer. Now, it can be creepy. And so customers or companies have experimented with it, and they have to be careful, but it's definitely a functional technology. And you'll see it. You can go into a store, you go into a Target, and all of a sudden you're getting notifications on your phone that relate to Target, or you can see that the phone knows that you're in Target. So traffic data, this one's actually kind of cool. So Google Maps is a hugely popular product. I'd be surprised if there aren't a lot of people on this phone or on this call that use Google Maps. So what they do, there's two uses of Google Maps. So you can, if you set up an ID in Google Maps, that's one thing. But if you just install the app and don't set up an ID, don't log in, if you will, it will give you information and so forth. But the other thing it does is it sends the data. It doesn't care who the person is, but it looks at the data that is flowing on a given road. And so if it knows that the road, because of Google Maps, they've gone and collected the data, they know that that freeway has a speed limit of 70 miles an hour. And so it looks at all the phones as they're moving down the freeway, and if they're, so let's say 60 miles, excuse me, 60 or 50 miles an hour fast enough, they'll paint on the map for others paint a green line that says, hey, this road is running at its normal rate. And then if all of a sudden the traffic all slows down and it's all running at 30 miles an hour, it paints a yellow and says, hey, the traffic is slow. There's something going on, whether it's rubbernecking or an accident or whatever. And then if you're down at 5 or 10 miles an hour, it turns it red and provides that information back. So if you're a Google user, it's, again, it doesn't care who you are. It just knows that there's a bunch of cell phones that have my app, and I'm forwarding information back to the Google server to say that this is how fast I'm moving. Again, it doesn't care who you are. It just wants that raw data to be able to reflect back. Now, the funny thing about it is, and we've done this, my wife and I have traveled across country, and if you use Google Maps, I don't know if you've ever done this, but it sometimes we'd be on a freeway and there'd be an accident, and it's all red. And so all of a sudden it recommends that you exit at a particular location because you've set up Google Maps and you say, I'm going to, location Y. And it says, okay, based on the roads available, exit at this exit, go for travel on this frontage road for the next 10 miles and get back on the freeway. And we've done that successfully, and it's saved, some long cross-country trips. A couple times it saved us, half hour, 45 minutes to avoid a traffic jam. The funny part about it is you can tell who's running Google Maps because all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people that are exiting around one of these situations. And sometimes that can cause a backup as well. So it's pretty interesting, but it's a pretty cool service. And they've been incredibly successful with it. So one of the things that you can use if you want to reduce your exposure and knowledge of what you're doing is something called a virtual private network, or a VPN. And I have this, and it's the kind of thing you use when you're on a Wi-Fi. And you're on a public Wi-Fi, and so you don't know who else is on that network. When you're home, it's not as much of an issue, but when you're out in public and maybe you want to get onto your bank and look at something, a VPN is a great way to do that. And what happens when you use a VPN is it takes all your interactions and encrypts them and makes it unintelligible to somebody, only folks that have a key. So for example, I use a service, I can't remember the name of it. There's many out there, and there's very good ones. And you make that connection, and that connection terminates, in my case, if you're in Holland, terminates in Chicago. So my conversation, you see on the left, I'm VPN 88, there's my address, my actual computer or cell phone or tablet's address. I encrypt the connection, and then it reconnects to the internet out of Chicago and gets converted back to my real address, which you see there is 178.62.331.146. So as far as anybody on the internet knows, that's your address, and it looks like you're in Chicago. You're not in Holland. And these companies have, I can say, well, I want to be connected to, I want to be reconnected to the internet in England, or because, depending on the company you hook up with. Well, what happens then is everything that's traveling across the cell phone network is encrypted. AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, they can't see it. And it masks who you are. And so it doesn't mean when I log on to Amazon, now I'm known again. And might be known as, gee, I've got a different address than what it is. And so, but the fact that you've provided your credentials to whatever thing you've signed on to, they now know that's you, but you've kept your data secure through networks that might be exposed to hackers and various ISPs and so forth. So VPNs, it's a pretty cool thing. The price you pay is that encryption it slows down the connection. So you don't necessarily want to use it all the time, but there's certain situations when you do. So I thought I'd throw in a couple of things about digital assistants, going back to the little commercial that we ran. Digital assistants, whether it's Alexa or Siri and so forth, you can see it's grown like crazy. And because of how we interact, they're again collecting more data. They're all pretty well designed in that they're not sitting there collecting. There's always this thing about, oh, they're collecting conversations when they're when you're just talking, and they all have a word that you say, or a phrase that once you say that phrase, then they start paying attention. Everything else is thrown out. So there's a lot of drama that's not true about these. But the point is, with these, you're asking more questions, you're doing more things, and they're collecting more data about you because of how you interact with digital assistants. And even now wearables. So, if you have an Apple Watch, your health information now is being collected in terms of your heart rate, the amount of exercise you do. You might have a GPS tracker on a bicycle. They even have rings that you can put on a finger to measure your heart rate and so forth. So they're collecting more and more information. Now, Apple's pretty good about security, but the companies vary all over the map. So that's another point in which they can collect data about us. And this one, I just thought I'd throw this in. What this is a company, Clario software company. They did an analysis of 48 apps that you might have on your machine. And if you look across the top, you'll see email address, name, age, gender, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, race, religious beliefs, location, phone numbers, job title, height, weight, hobbies, what's your social profile, past employment, health and lifestyle, from lots of different variables. And so then what they did was they looked at these 48 apps, and I selected ones that I thought would be more known by people, and analyzed what percentage of all these data elements did they collect. And of the ones I selected, the worst one, and is always the one I don't do Facebook for this very reason, is they collect 71% of all those data elements. They collect them. And you can see Instagram is a little bit less. Nike, you can see them down the list. Netflix, about 26%. American Airlines, 26%. Amazon, about 24%. On down. Google Maps, they're about 20%. And I left this one in. Pornhub, I thought this was kind of funny. Pornhub doesn't collect anything, because anybody who's going out to look at pornography, they don't want to be known that they did that. And that company knows that for their business, however they do their business, they don't want their customers to think that they're collecting data. And so it's totally minimal. I thought that was kind of humorous. Anyhow, I just kind of picked those out of the group. Okay, here's where I really want to spend some time. And this is data brokers. They primarily exist to support the marketing industry. They're the largest collection of information about our lives. And the biggest company, the one I'm going to talk about, and there's many of them out there, you'll see in some charts, is historically it's called Acxiom. They bought a company called LiveRamp, and they've split part of it off. But for the purpose of this conversation, doesn't matter. This is the company we're going to talk about, and talk about the kind of data that they collect about us. So data collection and tracking, well, just a few statistics. There are about 4,000 data broker companies worldwide. So this isn't just the US, this is all over the world. About 1,400 leading brands sell information from store loyalty cards to data brokers. Remember the loyalty cards we were talking about. I know that in the case of the company I work for, we didn't do that. We considered the data that we collected about our people very personal information, so we kept it to ourselves, but many others do not. 80% of the US email addresses are on file. Acxiom, you can see over in the upper right, they have about 23,000 servers collecting and analyzing data. They have about data on about 500 million customers worldwide, and they collect about 3,000 data points on you if they can get it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. About 38% of employed Americans, their pay stub history is on Equifax. So what is the information worth? The data broker industry is about a $200 billion industry worldwide, so it's huge. The price for a list of 1,000 people with health conditions like anorexia, substance abuse, or depression, about $80. And the average for email address over time is about $90, higher if you're a traveler, lower for retail related emails, and so on. Oh, and then about 43% of the data brokers allow customers to opt out for free. Actually, that number has increased pretty dramatically. This graphic's a little old. We'll talk more about that later. So Axiom, they were founded in 1969 in Little Rock, Arkansas. When LiveRamp, when they merged the two companies, they moved to San Francisco. They're a marketing information provider. And so companies, you'll see in a minute, people go to this company and say, I want to buy information, and we'll talk more about that. It's a public company. Ramp is their stock market symbol. They have about 8,800, almost 9,000 clients worldwide. 47 of the top Fortune 100 are customers, 12 of the 15 credit card issuers, 7 of the top retail banks, 8 of the top telecom, 7 of the top retailers, 11 of the top automobile manufacturers, 6 of the top brokerage firms, 5 of the top 10 life and health insurance providers, and 8 of the top 10 lodging companies. So these folks are big, and they work with the leaders in the industry. They have behavioral insights on 1.2 billion email addresses around the world. They get about 10 billion records that update their databases from various sources every month. They do, on behalf of others, they do about 8.4 million screenings for criminal and credit checking annually. As again, we talked about, they had about 23,000 servers, 4,000 databases, and 10 petabytes of storage. The company that I work for, to run our entire company, an $8 billion company, we had about 3 petabytes. So they got a lot. So let's talk about some of the stuff that they have, and we're going to kind of delve into this more. So they have 45 years of historical data on name changes and residential history, age, gender, education, employment, political views, relationship status, number of children, purchases, activities and how you use media, loans, income, net worth, vehicles owned, properties owned, details about banking and insurance policies, credit that's been issued, likelihood somebody in the person in a household is planning to have a baby, planning to adopt a child, filing taxes in April, what religion, are they Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, whatever, what health interests that they care about, alcohol or tobacco interest, gaming, are they a gambler, likelihood that they're a heavy Facebook user, a social influencer, they're socially influenced, have no formal banking relationships, has no major medical insurance, what type of home, lots of different things. And so we're going to talk more about that. These are all just all the different companies they do business with. I'm not going to go into this detail, but it's just they do business with a lot of people, and you probably never heard of them. So let's take a look at this graphic, because this is kind of where it kind of shows you where all the stuff's coming from. So for decades, sort of the black and white side over on the left, these are data. This is data they've been getting forever, from some what you purchased, bankruptcies, deceased files, driver's license information, court records, criminal records, warranty registration cards, voter records, magazine subscribers, customer surveys, telephone directories, property records, vehicle records. They have 45 years of data of that kind of information. Now, what's happened is over on the left hand, or sorry, excuse me, on the right hand side, with technology, things have changed a great deal. So they get information coming in from Experian and the credit agencies. I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute. Samba TV. So if you have any TV other than a Samsung, I believe it is, they're collecting data about your viewing habits. So there's a piece of Samba software on your machine, on your television, that refers back to Axiom. What you watch, when you watch it, and from that they derive your interest. I think the number is, and this is an older graphic, but I think the current number is about 46 million TV devices worldwide that are feeding information from the Samba TV software. Crossix pulls health information, health records from lots of consumers. And I say all this, and it's, they don't have a social security number. They don't have, they're just, they identify people, and I'll show you, we'll talk a little bit about how they correlate things within Axiom. So Crossix, Frickle IT, that's a, if you have, there's a company that makes about 2,000 apps, and those apps look for beacons that are plugged into malls, into kiosks and different places, so they know where you've been. It doesn't necessarily, they aren't collecting location data per se like a carrier can, but if you're running that app and you go by something, they say, oh, well, they just interacted with device X, or you know, again, a marketing kind of thing. So Axiom takes all this data, and using an email address, using phone numbers, using postal addresses, using names, using what IP address you find when you are on the web, cookies, device IDs, geolocation, all these things, and it correlates it. So they don't, and they provide this information, so they don't, they may have your social security number, but they don't keep it, and they don't ever sell it to anybody. But other information they do. And so they have this thing that helps them correlate. And I'll give you an example. So they get from the credit card company. Oh, actually, let me get to my next slide here. So Ibotta, and the reason I talk about this one is because as a retailer, we supported Ibotta. Our marketing department came to us and said, Ibotta is going to give coupons to their customers. So if you install the Ibotta app on your phone, and you say I'm a Meijer shopper, or a Home Depot shopper, or pick virtually any retailer on the planet, and you tell them you're part of, you're one of their customers, what the retailer does is they send to Ibotta every transaction and every item purchased in that transaction. They don't say the name. They just say at such and such a time, this transaction occurred at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 4:10 and 50 seconds at Meijers, and they checked out. The cost was, they spent $100, and here's all the items they bought. And so they take that, and then if you signed up the app and say I'm a Meijer shopper, and they give you coupons, they correlate what you've signed up to those transactions. So Meijer hasn't given away any information about you, just the fact that there's a transaction that occurred, a Visa card was used, and this much money was spent, and then they correlate it, and they attract you to install the app, because you're going to get 50% off coupons, or $1 off, or whatever it is, for various products, whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot or Meijer or Family Fare, or Napa Auto Parts, or pharmacies and so forth. So they take all that data, they anonymize the data, as I mentioned, transaction date, location, time, item level data, and send it off to LiveRamp. So then LiveRamp knows credit card information, it knows all these different things, and it correlates and connects this stuff together. So what can you buy from Cat? If I'm a retailer and I've got my loyalty program and I want to know more about my people, I can have their email address or have their phone number. I can get out from them geography, a whole set of data elements about geography, their marital status, age and lifestyle, the presence of children, the household composition, home and property. The ones I've highlighted here, I'm going to show you, just give you kind of a little sample of what comes with it. Income and affluence measures, occupation and employment measures, lifestyle, lots of different things that they can, if they want to know more about their customer, they can buy and say, or I wanted to do a mass mailing. And so give me 1,000 people in Holland that are middle income, use their credit cards regularly, don't have any kids in the household. For example, how they determine if you're going to have a baby is you're buying baby products when you go to the grocery store. You buy diapers. You went to Buy Baby and you bought a crib. And so that's how Axiom infers what the characteristics of that customer is. So here's a couple of examples. Home and property. If I buy the home and property set, I get a set of data elements that says, what's the homeowner's status? How many times have they been a home buyer? Is what are they in their fourth home, fifth home? When do they move in? How long have they been there, in kind of a range? And some of these might be empty. Some of these data elements might be empty, and some might have information that's based on what they could gather and what they could correlate about you. The month you moved into your current home, length of residence, type of property, number of bedrooms, date home built. And the income and influence measures, what the household income, total household income is, who the primary breadwinner is, what's the range, are there two homeowner? Is a partner has an earning occupation? What is the occupation? Number of earners in the household, number of unemployed in the household, proportion of adults unemployed. It makes all these inferences based on all that data they're collecting. So it may be perfect, it may not be perfect at all, or some of these data elements are empty. It depends on what they've been able to collect about that particular person. Finance and insurance. Do they have a credit card? Do they have a Visa and MasterCard? Do they have an American Express? Do they have a store card? Do they have a debit card? Do they have a private? What's the likelihood they have a private pension? What's the likelihood they're regular savers? What's the likelihood they have a child savings program? Do they buy and sell stocks? How active are they in the market? Do they have life insurance? On and on and on. Do they have a will? In the channel behavior, this is in the marketing world, it's how do you interact? How does one interact with companies? Do you buy groceries online often? Sometimes, never. Do you use the internet for email, for searching, for weather information? Do you do price comparison? Do you gamble and bet? Do you pay your bills online? Are you more likely to research a tech product online versus in a store or from a catalog? On and down. Do you use free TV? Do you have a satellite TV, cable TV? Do you read newspapers? Do you read news often? Sorry, not newspapers, but read news online. Often, never, sometimes. What's the likelihood you'll book a vacation online or through an agent? So all these characteristics I list back here, it has that kind of. Remember, all these make up about 3,000 data elements that they collect and infer about people. So it is through that these guys are the ones that I'm kind of amazed by. They've been around for years. You don't know who they are, but that's why you'll get an offer in the mail or you get an offer online for something that may appeal to your interest, is because somebody who is doing that has used this data behind the scenes. So a little bit about internet advertising. There's there's a couple different ways they can do advertising. So Google has a service called AdWords. And so you can subscribe to AdWords and basically say, I'm Van Weeren Hardware, and I've got let's use Home Depot because that's more, Van Weeren Hardware is a wonderful store, but let's use Home Depot. And so if you're a DIY person that does build stuff on your own, they've developed that. And so when you do a search that says, I want to buy power tools, I can say as Lowe's, anytime somebody does a search for power tools, part of the results that you put up is an ad for power tools at Lowe's. And so those are called AdWords, and you subscribe to that. And so that's why when you do a Google search and you look at the results, the first few results may have a little box that says ad. And that's because somebody has, you hit a word that somebody has paid for, that when somebody searches for that word, your ad comes up. Facebook, again, I'm not a Facebook person, but they have a similar thing. But the one I think is more interesting is real-time bidding. So what this is there's a supply and a demand. So a supply is, I've got an app or I've got a website and I have some space and I want to make a little money. And so I want to have an ad appear there. And so on the supply side, all these different companies, and there's thousands, they go to a real-time bidding service, what's called an ad exchange. This one, the graphic I picked was for one of them. And so what I provide to the exchange is I have a customer and I know whatever I know about them. And let's say I know, well, this person is into hardware or is into sports or whatever, is a runner. And down below, I have on my screen this kind of real estate that I want to put an ad in where the blue is. And on the demand side, there's people out there that say, I want to put an ad, I'll pay $1 for, if you can deliver to me a customer that is a runner, for you to put my ad when a runner, a person looking for an ad has a runner, and I want you to put my ad. And so I bid. And so maybe, REI offers $1 and Dick's Sporting Goods offers 75 cents. And some other sporting goods store, or maybe even Meijer, says, I'll offer $2 or whatever. So that what happens is real time, all the time, as you go to a mobile app and you send a request and say, I have this kind of person, and the exchange says, oh, okay, here's some offers that would want to go to that kind of person, and they'll pick the highest dollar amount that the advertiser will pay you to post that ad. And so they do that exchange and they come back. And so once the bid is satisfied, then it passes over to you the impression that you then put on the screen. And so what you need to understand is this happens in about 200 milliseconds. So as you scroll through web pages, as you interact with ads on your phone, all this stuff is going behind the scenes that determines what ads they post to you.
Did you say that again?
Uh-oh,
Sorry.
see, speaking of one of my my Siri woke up. So real-time bidding, it's a big business. There's lots of ad exchanges. You can see big name companies participate in this. And this particular one has 90,000 mobile apps and 10,000 advertisers. And so it's a huge business. So last thing here is, what can you do about it? Each company, and so some things have changed. Apple's made some moves. I'm not going to go into all the details, but some laws have been passed over the last few years. California passed a law in, I want to say it was 2018. Virginia passed one a little later. Colorado passed one. Nevada passed a real lightweight one. And then the EU passed GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. And these laws have a whole bunch of rules. And what I did was I kind of picked some of the highlights. They give you the right to access information these companies have about you. They give you the right to extract that data and do whatever you want to with it. Give you the right to request that certain data be deleted. Give you the right to correct inaccuracies. Give you the right to opt out of sales. In other words, if they're going to sell that data, you can say, no, you can't sell my data. And the right to opt out of targeted advertising. So that has kind of changed the game. And actually, because of these laws, there's been more knowledge gained on who's collecting what than has ever been known before. So each company has a mechanism for you to see and control what is collected about you. Like I say, few states have laws. And there's also companies you can hire that will go out and clean up your data. And I don't know who's good and who's bad at it, but I know there's a few out there. So, so there's now a basis that we can do something about it. What I would tell you about all this is the whole electronic collection is pay attention. I know that's real basic, but understand what you use. Understand when they say you accept cookies or not. I challenge you to say, well, and suppose just saying I accept, go read the cookie policy, and you will see in there that you can shut off third-party cookies. You don't want to shut off first-party cookies because typically the app doesn't work as well, but you want to get rid of those third-party cookies. And so you can manage your settings. You can do it through browsers. There's default in Safari and Chrome. Chrome, by the way, Chrome is a very popular browser, but Chrome is built by Google. And remember, how Google makes money is through ads. So if you use Chrome, they're tracking even more information about you than if you just do Google search. Apps, manage your settings and the various apps you run in your cell phone, app run or your tablet. Pay attention to your settings and websites. And the cookie, we talked about cookies and location information. Do you want to, I get the location information. There's certain apps that I run that I want it to know my location. There's other apps I don't want them to know. And so you make that decision. And you can use a VPN. Again, that keeps a certain level of it private. It doesn't solve the whole problem. But as we talked about earlier, in public places and in terms of what the carriers know about you, a VPN kind of reduces that collection. So my final comment here is there's an amazing amount of information that is collected about us, and it's available to anyone for a price. And companies attempt to anonymize data and not violate any laws, but quite frankly, the laws are not very good here. There's way more stuff going on than probably should. But then I'll also have the comment that is my attitude is, if you aren't doing anything nefarious, or, I mean, if you have a philosophical issue about sharing information, that's one thing. But if you don't have anything to hide, it's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of benign. And so you have to kind of decide what your attitude is, because I will tell you, if you want to change the situation, it is possible, but it's difficult and it's very time consuming. I'm going to have Kim send out to everybody who's on the call an article that I found that somebody did there, and I can't remember what the number is, maybe 50 or whatever different websites, and a little paragraph about here's how you can go out to this website and tell them not to collect your data or see your data and so forth. And so, but I will tell you, people that I know have done it. They can spend a year, they can spend 2 years, because the companies, this is not their first priority when you make the request. Because of these new laws that have passed, they have to support it, but it's not going to be an easy task. So anyhow, that's sorry, I've probably taken a little bit more time than I should, but that's a little bit of a broad brush of what goes on out there that you may or may not see.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. I have a couple questions or comments that have come into the chat, so I'll share those with you first, and then we'll give people a chance to unmute themselves if they'd like. So the first one was just from a member who said, last night during a period of insomnia, I was browsing Facebook at 3 a.m. This morning, Facebook is showing me ads for sleep aids. Is this possibly due to my late night activity?
It is absolutely due to your activity.
Yes, it is.
There is no question about it.
Yep. Okay. Second one is it only Samsung TVs that don't collect my watching habits?
I had the slide in here, but I was concerned about time. I can say, I'll tell you what, I will send with that email, I will send you a list of all the brands of TVs that have Samba software in it. And I believe I've seen it before. We're a Samsung house. It may be true that you can go in and configure the Samba software so it doesn't report information. I've seen it once before on some TV somewhere. But I'm not an expert on it at all.
Okay. And then the second part of this person's question is, my SNN illegal to sell?
Oh, social security number. There's rules about that. It is illegal. I back when I was working, there was always this thing of you couldn't use legally. They had always said social security number could not be used as a means of identification. The fact of the matter is many companies use it, but that's why they typically have employee numbers. I believe it is illegal to sell social security numbers.
I think so too. Okay. Next question is, what about Zoom? Are they collecting data? Oh boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent. I didn't, there's so much here trying to research, there's things that I knew and things that I researched, and that's actually a good question, but I did not look at specifically what they collect. Some companies are way better about it than others in terms of what they collect and what they retain.
Okay. Spectrum, do Spectrum collect data like Verizon? What if Google Maps is not open? Are they still collecting data? And can I see my liver ramp data?
Okay, so Spectrum, yes, they're collecting data too. And by the way, Spectrum is a marketing service. They actually, and that's not true. My point is they use the Verizon network. So Spectrum doesn't have their own cellular network. They ride on Verizon's towers and their infrastructure. So that's and yes, they do collect data. Again, I don't know each individual company, how much. I mean, this is such a, I'd have to spend several years to try and really understand all the details. It's just that the data brokers have one that's always interested me. And so I really enjoyed doing this research because I've known about Axiom for years and I got a lot smarter about it. Google Maps. If you have Google Maps installed on your phone, it is providing location data back to Google. And so you may not be logged on, just the mere fact of that the software is on your computer, on your cell phone, it's providing data. Also, I would tell you, if you have a non-Apple phone, an Android phone, Android is an operating system built by Google that Samsung and others use on their cell phones. So they're reporting your location information as well. Again, that one's pretty benign because all they're doing is they're saying, hey, I've got a cell phone here, don't care who owns it, and it's moving down the road at this particular speed. And so you're helping contribute to the community, but you're not revealing any information about you. That would be done through other minions and other apps. But the Google Maps thing is, it's actually, I think it's a pretty cool implementation. What was then? She asked a third question. What was the third question?
Can I see my liver ramp data?
Yeah, liver ramp. Yes, you can. And in this email I'll send out, it has information about how to contact them. They have forms, and many of these companies have forms you fill out, and they'll provide information that they have. That it varies. Some will provide information that they have. Some will allow you to turn off the selling of their information. But yes, LiverAmp has ways that you can do that.
Okay. That is all that I have in the chat right now. So we have a couple more minutes left. If anybody wants to oh, here comes another one. Sorry, hold on.
It's all right.
Whenever any form asks my income, I either grossly understate it or else leave it blank. Even my bank is not entitled to know my income unless I'm applying for credit specifically. Is this an example of using common sense? Why volunteer unnecessary stuff?
Absolutely true. I will tell you, though, that they'll still figure it out through other means. So think about it, and you're absolutely right. It's a very wise thing to fill things out that way. But they will look at your credit card history.
Mhm.
And there are called MCC codes. No, there's another code. I can't remember what it is. Anyhow, there's codes that the credit card companies, when they sell the data, it says it's this kind of transaction, and they know the type of retailer, and based on the size of the transaction and where you spend your money, if you think about it, over time, they'll be able to derive, do you travel a lot? Gee, how do you afford to do that? Do you spend money at jewelry stores? They will, do you shop at TJ Maxx or do you shop at Nordstrom's? They will infer things that, yes, you're right, you haven't provided specifically. It doesn't mean they won't be able to make, over time, collect enough information to be able to figure out in general what your income status is, is the way I'll put it.
Great, thank you.
This is-
Anybody else?
This is Louis.
Yeah, Lou.
Dave, I have an anecdote I can relate to illustrate how monumental the task might be to get rid of cookies, for example.
Ah, yes.
There's a website that I consult very frequently in my research on music. And one day I thought, what a great idea for me to get rid of the cookies from this site. So I dug into it, and they allow the user to do that. And then when I did, a list of websites, and based on the domain name and the extension, they were from around the world.
Mhm.
I could uncheck the box for each one of these companies that were inserting cookies onto my hard drive.
Yep.
I started the task, and then I realized that it seemed to be infinite in size.
Yes.
I scrolled down, and I was so dismayed by the fact that there were literally hundreds of them. And again, from around the world, and I could tell this from the .de, .uk, and so on.
Sure.
I gave up. It was just too time consuming. I had other things to live for other than unchecking boxes.
Yep.
So it is pervasive and it is bothersome. Now, accordingly, it can be useful to the user to have these cookies there. It may be useful for me to go back to Lowe's.com and know that I put this particular machine in my cart when I was there 9 days ago, and it's still there, and it reminds me that I haven't bought it, and maybe I should. But I also believe that there's some information gathered which is less useful to me, the user, but it's difficult to discern what to do about it at times.
You're absolutely, it's a great example, Louis, and what you're talking about is the difference in your example, the difference between first-party cookies and third-party cookies. The first-party cookies, you typically don't want to get rid of because they make the site more effective, as the example that you used about the shopping basket. And with some of the laws and some of the things that Apple has done, you're getting more opportunity to say, I don't want third-party cookies. When it says I accept cookies, if you don't, it typically takes you to that site's policy. And typically there's a way to turn off third-party cookies so that a lot of those miscellaneous ones from around the world that you saw that went on forever, in the future won't get stored on your machine. And so, but yeah, it's a perfect example of how arduous the task is.
I have another question about the Samba software.
Yes.
I understand that the manufacturers of televisions, whether it's LG, RCA, Sony, they may have interest in knowing about my behavior, but it seems somewhat nefarious that they would be allowed to embed this kind of software onto a television set.
I agree.
There must be something in, and again, I don't know how much information they can glean other than hours spent, channels watched, for advertising purposes, but what's in it for the manufacturers to have the Samba software on their machines as a matter of course?
I'm sure that what's going on is Samba is paying the manufacturer to have that information. And the other comment I would make, so we've cut the cord, and so we do everything with YouTube TV now. And of course, many of us use Netflix or Disney Plus or pick the service. I can guarantee you that with no extra software, they know everything that you watch, how long you watch it, whether you're jump around to different channels and so forth. So I'm sure Samba rewards the manufacturer for the installation of that software, but more and more as the streaming services take over and so forth, they're going to get the data anyway.
Mhm. Yes, and streaming has become more and more accessible and popular. And to be honest, I'm surprised that there are so many, I'll call them television channels, beyond the big names that are still out there in business, because there's so much competition for only so many hours of viewing per person per week.
Very good observation again. And so that's what, so we're getting into a whole nother topic here, but this is the conundrum that's existed for many years in the cable companies. So the cable companies, they would sell you a service and they would sell bundles, and some of these other channels, and some of them are quite interesting, honestly, but some of them are, you go, well, gee, that's a very specialized interest. And so those companies, the way they've made money is a cable company sells you a package, and all those channels come with it. And so there's been a movement, and it's never really gained any ground because it financially wouldn't work for the cable companies, that do everything on a channel by channel basis or smaller bundles. And that's been lobbied for, but in essence, the streaming services are changing all that. Of course, the other thing with the streaming services is how many different streaming services do you have to sign on to, and so forth. So that's a whole, that's a couple classes on media and distribution of media and how that's evolving around us.
I have a question. What effect has Facebook changing to Meta done? Has it done anything to the services or whatever?
No, that's really a name change, and it's Zuckerberg's. He wants to do his goal in looking at the long-term future is all about virtual reality, and so that's why it's called Meta. You sometimes hear people talking about the metaverse, but the fundamental product, Facebook has not changed as a result of that name. It really, for now, it's a name change, but it gives you a little bit of a vision of their strategy long term in terms of use of virtual reality, and that's again another huge topic.
If you're on Facebook, are you on Meta?
Yes. It's one and the same, just a different name.
Oh, okay.
I have a comment about Lewis's example of going out and having to check all those hundreds and hundreds of boxes. Sounds like that's a great opportunity for an app. $10, give it to some company and let them do all the box checking.
Yes, I believe there's apps out there to clean, and I know there's apps out there to clean out your cookie, if you will, database on your machine. Those do exist. And just like there's companies out there that will go help clean out your identity out of these different services. I have not explored either one of these, but I know they're out there, and I'm sure there are some. I could probably find recommendations of what's good and what's bad, but yeah, that exists. That definitely exists.
Then this one is from Bill Wells. Just one more thing in the chat. He wants to know if you get paid for drinking Diet Coke during presentation. Are you sending us a subliminal message to buy Diet Coke?
No, it's a bad habit I have. I'm sorry.
I
That's
couldn't
great.
help myself. I had to post that.
Oh, I loved it, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah. Dave, this was a lot of information, well-researched, excellent job. Thank you so much. I'm a little bit freaked out about a couple things that I've bought or places I've visited, but that's okay. I expect it to be. I will let your lovely wife wrap it up for us. And just again, thank you for another fantastic class.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kim, and especially thank you, Dave. I know he put a lot of work into this, doing all the research and all the pretty graphics he has there. I appreciate everybody attending today. He will be sending out some information to Kim, who will distribute it to everybody who signed up for this class. I think one of them is on the Samba software, the TV slide that you had, and then LiveRamp info. I think are the two notations that I picked up.
Yeah, actually, it's not LiveRamp, it's LiveRamp and many others. It's a list of places you can go for different websites and how to sort of deregister yourself or whatever.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, everybody, for attending, and we'll conclude the class today and have a great rest of the day.
One quick question.
Certainly.
Would it be possible to get a copy of your slides? There's so much valuable information in there to be able to.
Certainly. Yeah, I'm no pride of authorship. Happy to send them out. I'll send that out with the others.
Super.
Okay, and then I will send it to everyone registered for this class after I get it from Dave. Good question. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.